Stonecoast program we started this year to kind of bring our alumni base and our community. So students, alumni, all the literary community is welcome to these nights. And we are just sharing hard-earned wisdom from the field of creative writing. So we really honor all that. I mean, many of us are out there doing this work. Probably most of us are out there doing this work. We're figuring out our way as we go. And so we honor the work that everyone is doing. And we'll also end with a kind of skill and group share where everybody can add resources that they would like to share with the group. I'm going to share this document with all of us right now. This is a document that we'll be adding to as we go, so you can refer back to it if you need to touch back in on any of the resources that we talk about. And you're all also welcome to add to them yourselves. So tonight we are so lucky to be broaching one of the topics that I think we get a lot of questions about, which is marketing and self-promotion in the world of creative writing. And so I'm just going to introduce our three speakers. Before I do that, I would just like to, I mean, we've all been on Zoom for a year now, maybe more. So I probably don't even need to do this, but if anybody has forgotten or would like to know, Speaker View works really well for this kind of event because it shows you who's speaking. So it highlights whoever's talking. Please keep yourself muted unless you have a question at the end, or and feel free to use the chat. We definitely use that as a tool to ask questions, to engage with whatever is going on. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us. It's wonderful to see you all. I am Jenny O'Connell, and I am going to introduce our presenters tonight. So with us, we have Taryn Bowe, who is the Associate Director at Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance, where she loves supporting writers at all levels, curating special events, and bringing the work of Maine authors to larger audiences. Her short stories and essays have recently appeared or are forthcoming in Bellevue Literary Review, Joyland, and the Sewanee Review. She earned her MFA from Stonecoast in 2009 and currently lives in Brunswick, Maine with her husband and daughter. We've got Jasmine Skye, who is a queer SFF author represented by Mary C. Moore of Kimberly Cameron and Associates. She especially loves complex secondary worlds with LGBTQIA+ characters who get to go on heroic adventures and claim their own happy endings. Jasmine earned an MFA in popular fiction from the University of Southern Maine's Stonecoast program in January 2020. When she's not working her day job as a diversity and inclusion outreach coordinator, Jasmine's a voracious reader, a hobbyist cosplayer, and a YouTuber. I love that term, YouTuber. It took me a while as an adult to figure out what that was, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And finally, we have Amanda Plow, who graduated from Stonecoast in 2015 with a concentration in creative nonfiction. And she co-produces the virtual Stonehouse Readers Series, which you all should sign up for. It's a blast. Every Sunday night, people gather. Stonecoast alumni, Stonecoast students, Stonecoast faculty, everybody is welcome to sign up to read. And there's featured readers every week. I did it last week. It was a blast. And you just come and you read and people come and listen. And so it's a beautiful way of bringing the community together. So I'll let Amanda share more about that soon. Back to her bio. Her weekly newsletter, Plow Shares, is published once a week and ranges in content from listicle to memoir and cultural criticism. During the day, Amanda creates content full-time for the oldest synagogue in Los Angeles. A piece of her heart remains in Portland, Maine. So welcome. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to our three presenters to lead us through the world of marketing and self-promotion. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Jenny. Amanda, would you mind sharing the PowerPoint when you get a chance? Today we have a pretty full schedule. I think we're definitely going to go through a lot of different topics. We took a while talking amongst ourselves about the various things that are all intertwined and related. with this various topic of promoting yourself and branding yourself and building community, because that's a part of promoting and branding yourself. So we are going to talk first about building community, then we're going to talk about marketing tools, and then we'll go into tips and tricks, and then we can open it up to everyone, because I'm sure a ton of you have your own tips and tricks that you can share with all of this. But we'll start off with Taryn talking about building community.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's really great to be here. And I kind of wear two different hats in my world. I don't like that saying, but I'm going to say it just for clarity's sake. So I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about like both of those roles, both as a writer of literary fiction, trying to find my audience and communities, and also as associate director at Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. So just about like my fiction self first. I when it comes to just talking about my own writing, I was hesitant to accept Jenny's request to talk tonight because I really am not a great personal self promoter, and it's not something I've ever been comfortable with. That said, I can easily talk to you about some of the work we do at Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance to celebrate and promote others, and I can talk to you about how much I love doing that work and how self-promotion, even though it's called self-promotion, really is not just about screaming about your work into the void. There's really other people who are here to help you and support you and who actually like love to share word about the great work that you're doing. And I find that comforting as somebody who doesn't naturally feel super skilled about self-promoting my own work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Maine Writers and Publishers really quick. I'll talk more about them later when we talk about specific marketing activities. And then I'm also going to tell you personally what communities I've tapped into that have really made a difference to me. So Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance is a nonprofit literary arts organization in Maine. We have about 1,400 members, and that's how people join our community initially is coming through the membership door. We support our members with workshops and retreats, and with scholarship opportunities and fellowship opportunities, and also with help just connecting them with other writers through various mechanisms, and also promoting their work. And we also aim to kind of deepen and broaden the literary community in Maine itself, and we do that by hosting lots of events on Zoom and in person, and by offering some free creative writing programs to under-resourced communities. Jenny taught one of them at a residential facility for people recovering from opioid addiction. So we just do a lot of things in the community to try to bring it together as well. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but in this section about building community, I'm going to talk about what has been really important to me, and then also just to get your ideas flowing, give you a few more examples of non-literary communities that have been helpful to other folks I know in getting the word about their work out. So to me, around 2017, I had just lost my mother. My daughter was just, old enough that she didn't need me every single moment. And there was just this huge hole that I really felt I needed to fill by pursuing more writing communities than I had previously been a part of. And so part of the drive for me in building community was less about necessarily strategy and promoting my work at the time, and more just about psychological need for connection with others doing like-minded work. But I think that, as you'll see, that's the whole point of this, is connecting with others that are doing like-minded work and or care about like-minded causes, and that ultimately when those connections are genuine and real, they can really lead to building your audience and building your readership and people who can recognize your name. So one of the communities that was really helpful for me at the time was the Tin House Writing Workshop. Those take place in Oregon. They're really wonderful because they bring in folks from all across the country. They bring in instructors from all across the country. And then when you become a part of that, you also become part of this larger structure. They have a press, they have a Twitter presence, they have a web presence, and all this other stuff. So for me, that was a great way to meet other writers and instructors, but then also tap into just the system that has its own, newsletter. So when you have like a publication, you can share that with folks. That was huge. And then before I started working at Maine Writers Publishers Alliance, I was taking some of their 10-week classes for the same reasons. I wanted to connect with other writers in my community, because I felt like I needed even more at that time than just kind of the virtual connections. Like I legit needed people to meet me for a glass of wine and be like, this is really hard. Like, how can we finish this novel? How can we keep sending stuff out? So that was another one, Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance. And I know Stonecoast alumni were also big for me in terms of people that I had graduated with at the time who were part of various groups. So those are just a few examples of literary communities that have been helpful to me. Other ones I've heard wonderful things about, and God, there are so many. I invite you to drop in ones that have been helpful for you into the chat too. Like, I love an active chat during an event or a presentation. But I've heard wonderful things about VONA, Voices of Our Nations, and arts for writers of color. I know there's specific workshops in the summer in communities for science fiction and fantasy, like Clarion. And then just to allow you guys to think outside the box, and many of you probably already have, about communities that are non-literary in nature, but can really do a huge job promoting your work, is I'm just going to give you a few examples from people I know who've tapped into other natural communities to get the word out there, and then I'll turn it over to Amanda. A friend of mine, Susan Casey, wrote a book about grief and sibling loss. And so her efforts to get word about that book out was really tapping into the grief and loss community, which included like the Center for Grieving Children, but it also included podcasts about grief and loss. And it also included radio spots and cable TV spots. I am in a writing group with Brett Willis, who's a fiction writer and editor of the Maine Review, and he works at Allagash Brewing. And so one of his efforts that was a little bit thwarted by the pandemic, but about to really take off, was this reading that combined the writing communities and the beer communities. And it was called Draft, and it paired people talking about, mostly emerging writers, reading from works in progress with like the draft beer that was paired with their work. And that had a great attendance, and again was a great way for him to be part of the community, but also to get his name out. Two more quick examples. Phuc Tran in 2020, he's a CNF writer. He wrote the memoir Saigon, which was about his experience immigrating to the States from Saigon, and how much he felt like a misfit. But he also owns Tsunami Tattoo in Portland. And his book launch was one of the first ones we at Maine Writers did during the pandemic. And it was just amazing how much his tattoo community came out for him. There was like over 300 people, like the chat was going nuts. It was crazy. And again, like, you know, he doesn't have a huge Twitter presence. Like, I don't think he's on Twitter. He must have, you know, other social media platforms to dig into, but it was really just a testament to how much being a beloved member of any community can really be helpful for writing and building your platform. The one other example I'm going to give, just because it's kind of a different example, is I have a co-worker and friend, Samara Coldoyan, who wrote a children's book, which is also in verse, called Magnificent Homespun Brown. And it's all about, it's for her daughter, and it's about being a brown girl in a place that's mostly white, and how like tremendously joyful and wonderful that can be. It doesn't have to be, you know, something that's not necessarily like makes you feel like a misfit. And so she was really supported a lot by Indigo Arts Organization in Portland, which supports the development of Black and Brown artists. And I know I'm giving a lot of Maine examples, but there's places like this everywhere. And they were huge in terms of her book launch. And I think another resource for her, which some of you might be able to tap into for your own work, is also school systems, connecting with the folks doing equity work in school systems to try to get more diverse books into the classroom, into the hands of students, and to try to schedule some more diverse authors for reading. So again, drop your ideas into the chat, but those are just a few to get you started of kind of non-virtual communities that are just around you that can be really helpful. And Amanda and Jasmine are going to talk about some examples of virtual communities and other communities as well. I'm going to turn over to Amanda.
Okay, well, thank you. A couple of different organizations kind of kind of came to mind, and I it's nice to see that I'm not the only person who's not joining from Maine at this particular moment. So if there are any other organizations that you're like pretty jazzed about right now, definitely throw those in the chat. So we wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of different social media channels. I think that for me, I'm most active in my personal life and my writing life on Instagram. I follow bookstores, publishers, other writers. Roxane Gay has like one of my favorite Instagram accounts of all times, and it's mostly pictures of things that she's baking, even though she's like a New York Times bestselling author. And it's really interesting how some writers are using this platform to kind of use Instagram as a way to promote their work, but also like connect as a live human, sharing details about their families, their homes, their food, my second favorite love, their pets. So I do have some examples of my favorite accounts that I can go through with you. In terms of Facebook, I think that, I've learned a lot with this Stonehouse Reader series that Troy Myers and I just he had the idea and I was like, hey, can we help? And we're constantly sharing details about those events through other Stonecoast writer groups on Facebook. And, without Facebook, I'm not sure if I would be here with you right now. So it's definitely like an important tool for me to stay connected. Jasmine, did you have something that you wanted to say about Twitter or Snapchat in particular? I know that we're already about 10 minutes in.
Yeah, so I definitely think that in the world of social media and considering where you want to put your efforts in social media, there's kind of the used to be the big three, and now it's really the big two, which are Instagram and Twitter. Facebook had its time and it is still very big in certain communities. So it really, like, it's part of knowing your audience, right? There are still a lot of communities where Facebook is a great way to promote yourself. And absolutely, as Amanda said, Facebook is a great way still to be in groups and to find events and things like that. But in terms of pure sort of branding, unfortunately, in the modern online world, you can't get by with just Facebook very easily. Twitter and Instagram, a lot of people suggest that you should have at least one of those, whichever one appeals to you more. Instagram is all image based, and as Amanda said, you don't have to figure out like what book related things you would be taking pictures on. You could take pictures on whatever it is in your life that is important to you, that's just helping people get a sense of who you are, because a big part of branding yourself as a writer is branding yourself as a person. So the things that you care about, if you try to make that clear through your social media presence, and if that's also the stuff that you write about or that are themes in your writing, if you post a lot of pictures of your family and family is a big theme in your writing, whether it's your family or it's fictional families, whatever that may be, you're giving your potential audience a sense of who you are and what you care about, right? I use Twitter primarily. I'm on Instagram, but that's for my cosplay. So again, using other hobbies to, show who you are. I do a lot of cosplay and like anime and comic conventions, especially pre the pandemic. Hopefully, again, post the pandemic, we'll see. But so my Instagram is entirely that community, is the cosplay community, and I really do hope that at the point in which I might have a book to promote, especially since I write science fiction and fantasy, and that's definitely a community that quite enjoys science fiction and fantasy. I'll be able to kind of use that community to get the word out about my book. That sounds negative. I don't want to use them in a negative sense, but all of my friends in that community might be willing to support me and spread the word about my book if they're excited about it. And it's just a place that I can promote that kind of thing. But Twitter is where I spend most of my time to connect with the writing community. Twitter there are like two different writing communities. There's the book community on Instagram. It's called Bookstagram. And then there's the Twitter writing community. And Twitter writing community is a great way to connect with most authors are on Twitter, most published authors, not all, but a lot. And it's also if you are at the stage of your career or you are trying to build the type of writing career that involves getting an agent and finding an editor through traditional publishing, Twitter is one of the best ways to connect with and find agents and also sort of like learn about different houses and imprints. Most imprints have Twitter accounts and promote things on their Twitter accounts, so you can follow all of that. But then there's also just a ton of ways to connect with community on Twitter. There's a ton of hashtag events that you can join and see other members in your particular writing community, whether that's writing, kid lit, writing creative nonfiction, memoir, essay, writing, fiction, literary fiction, whatever that may be. There are different events on Twitter that you can seek out through hashtags and other events to connect with. And then there's also a very popular sort of growing thing on Twitter, which are the Twitter DM groups, the direct message groups. You can have up to 50 people in a group in direct messages on Twitter. And so a lot of people have been building these writing support groups on Twitter that are these semi-private spaces for you to ask questions, share resources, and support each other. So I'm part of one of those groups. We're called the Quoke Crew. And we started as a group of writers across all genres who were all looking for agents. And now we've progressed, but that is another community that I have built that we all promote each other when one of us gets a book deal or anything, any good news, a short story publication, anything to promote, then we promote each other. And there's 50 writers that are automatically invested in you and you're invested in them. So Twitter's a great platform if you like it. The general rule of thumb with all social media is if you don't like that platform, then it's not worth it to invest the time in it. If you don't like being on it as a consumer of the platform, you don't like the communities on it, then it's not worth it. So Snapchat is an example of a community that had its heyday that has definitely mostly died, and I wouldn't suggest using Snapchat, but I will transition from Snapchat into the current community that kind of built off of Snapchat, which is TikTok. So if you're the kind of person that writes things that aims towards teenagers or young adults, then TikTok is very big right now. Is TikTok gonna last? I kind of doubt it. I kind of think it's going to have its heyday for the next couple years. And there are authors that are very successfully using TikTok and having viral, 5-second videos that promote themselves that are selling their books. But again, it's a very specific audience. And I don't know if it'll last the same way Vine died, the same way like a lot of other platforms have died, right? So, but I bring that up to say that there are going to be platforms that come up again and again of varying types. There's that new platform called Clubhouse that is like Twitter, but it's entirely audio. And when you see these things come up, if it's something that interests you, if you're the kind of person that loves making those funny, quick, short little videos and you love being creative about it, jump on it, use it while it's around, and you can get a lot of good promotion out of it. But if it's not something that you care about, then it's not likely to matter. Because those things tend to be kind of short but sweet moments of promotion. So, and then I think the next slide is on the other platform that is a platform I quite like, but is another one that you really shouldn't use it unless you already love the platform, which is Authortube, which is a section of YouTube. There's a whole bunch of people on YouTube who promote books. That's called BookTube, and read books, do reading vlogs, all of that. And then a branch of BookTube has started relatively recently, and that's called Authortube. And it's basically where authors do YouTube videos sharing their process, sharing things about their book. Mostly it's a community for authors to other authors. So while it can promote you and will promote you, especially if you are consistent with it, it's a lot more like all of these other communities we've talked about that are really just ways to connect with other writers. And by connecting with other writers, you inevitably help build your brand and help build the word about things when you have things to promote. But I do think that on the whole, the top two platforms you should consider in terms of marketing and self-promotion are Instagram and Twitter. And then number three is in-person communities, because the number one thing that sells books is word of mouth. So any sort of like personal communities that you have, and it doesn't have to be in person, but any personal communities that you have that people get to know you and love you as a person is going to sell books way more than any other type of marketing. Books or stories or whatever it is that you do, plays, whatever it is that you do. So let's move into marketing tools. And I think Amanda is going to start us off with that.
Yeah, I agree. If it's Instagram, Twitter, in person, definite priorities for me. And I just happen to enjoy Instagram a lot more than I enjoy Twitter. So definitely like follow your heart and commit to your accounts as much as you feel like you can. It's not like, yeah, anyway. Okay, so I thought I'd start by just sharing a couple of basic tools that you can acquire pretty easily to kind of level up your online presence, right? So we're here, we're in a Zoom. A lot of readings are happening through Zoom. A lot of meetings are happening through Zoom. I definitely recommend, depending on your situation, having headphones to make sure to cut down on feedback in your audio, a microphone if you have it, especially if you end up being asked to present something like this. My microphone is being loaned right now, but if perhaps an ambulance went by or my cat jumped on something and knocked it down, having a dedicated microphone could help reduce the background noise and help you sound a little bit more professional. And then also, I've had a surprising use of a ring light. And all of the examples that I have here are just basically things that I found on Amazon, probably less than $40 a piece. It doesn't have to be a big investment. You don't have to break the bank on like, a Yeti microphone or whatever for like the podcast professionals. Just something for just that little bit of assurance that you're just sounding good. Okay, and looks like that maybe didn't work, but I also suggest
it's still appropriate, because if you don't have a headshot, that's also not great.
I don't know where that one went. Anyway, I had been using a headshot from like 8 years ago. It was a photo that I loved. I felt like I looked beautiful in it, but it was just really old and it didn't look like me anymore. And so when my job first asked me for a picture of myself for the website, I was like, oh, well, this is too old. I don't really have anything. And so I use this photo here in the middle, which is just a candid photo from a restaurant, totally not appropriate to provide to my employer. And so then I realized like, I just really need something with a neutral background that looks like myself, where I am now. And this photo was from within the last year. I just had my husband come out and literally just hold his phone in front of me and take a picture. And that's as easy as it can be. I think that like having a photograph that is relatively up to date, that looks like you with nothing in the background, I think is really important in terms of like setting the stage for presenting yourself as a professional. And again, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be as good as like the person with the best phone in your life. Continuing on the like Zoom participant subject, I'm really lucky that I have a very small office in my apartment. I have this beautiful bookshelf right behind me, very appropriate for most of the events that I attend. But what if your work from home space isn't that great? You can easily get a webcam, green screen, or like, for me, the computer that I have doesn't support backgrounds on Zoom. So I would have to get something like this. And just to let you know, this was like, again, I think $40 or $50, and it could really help set like a really good professional clear tone. Like I noticed, Jasmine, I'm so jealous. You're at the Harris Secret right now. Can I come sit by the fire circle with you? And I wouldn't have the option to make a background like that unless I got one of these green screens. I just wanted to touch on two different apps that I use a lot both in my professional life, making content at my job, and then also in my own pursuits on Instagram. So Canva is an app that was kind of it was created as a way for schools to make yearbooks and for it to be easy for schools to make yearbooks. But it's since kind of ballooned into this sort of like very user-friendly design platform, kind of like Photoshop plus InDesign for dummies. Like it's just very user-friendly and intuitive, tons of customizable templates. I have here two examples from the Instagram account that I run for my job. Just a staffing announcement, a quote from a student, and then I'm both like embarrassed but also delighted to say that I have a fan account for Caesar salads, and this is a quote that I posted to my Caesar salad fan account from a poem by Frank O'Hara called Morning, which mentions the use of anchovies. So all of those I made on Canva, and it's just, you really don't need a design background at all. It's very, very intuitive. And I think that, yeah, so there was a photo website, Jasmine, that you were going to suggest.
Oh, yes. So, and I absolutely. So, if you are worried, if you don't have access to royalty-free and common use photos and you don't know where to find them, one place that you can go is called Pixabay. And everything you find on Pixabay is totally free for you to use and use on Canva. And that's just a good rule of thumb whenever you're posting anything promotional for yourself, is to make sure that your image is free to use. Now, if you took the picture, perfect, then it is yours to use. But if you're looking for a picture of a Caesar salad, and you don't know where to find a royalty-free Caesar salad picture, something like Pixabay, there's a couple other different ones like that. You can also even search on Google Images and just make sure to change the usage settings for common use and whatever the various settings are on Google Images. But I don't always trust the Google Images settings with that because it's not always very reliable. So Pixabay, Pixabay, is where I go to. And to jump on with how useful Canva is, I don't use Canva on Instagram, but I do use Canva for my thumbnail photos on YouTube and also on Twitter all the time. One of the hashtags that goes around every week is the WIP aesthetic hashtag, or the Wednesday WIP aesthetic hashtag, and people will post an aesthetic or a mood board of their current work in progress. And it's a way to find other writers who are writing things that you think are cool and follow each other and like each other's mood boards. So if you enjoy that kind of designing thing, creating a mood board is great. It's also a great way if you are going on the traditional route of trying to get an agent and get an editor and get traditionally published. I made an aesthetic mood board for my YA fantasy novel. They got me my agent, and when we made the official announcement that I had signed with my agent, she used that mood board as part of the official announcement on Twitter, and that got several editors that followed her interested and asked us to submit to them when it came time for us to go on submission to publishing houses. So it's a great way to kind of give people a sense. And I will definitely send or give you guys an example of that in a second.
Okay, so we're trying to keep it to roughly about 10 minutes for each of us. So we're approaching the 28-minute mark. So just, any questions, throw them in the chat. Follow up with me after. Fixing your photos. This is a picture of my dog, Russell. I got pretty into taking pictures of my pets in quarantine. So you'll notice the picture on the left, that's the original, and then the picture on the right, you'll see I used retouch to take out a picture of the leash and a little tag that's dangling from his little harness. And then I used Lightroom to kind of brighten up the contrast and the colors, and you'll see that, the picture on the left, definitely cute. The picture on the right, definitely getting more likes. So that can be the case if, like, say, you want to share a picture and there is a weird outlet behind you. You can very, very easily use something like retouch to just erase that, and the program like kind of intuits. It's like, again, Photoshop for dummies kind of. I definitely recommend it. And then, okay, we're going into tips and tricks. Wow, I'm a little bit bummed that some of these are not showing up. But anyway, if you're committing to, if you're ready to start a social media campaign, if you're like, okay, I'm going to join Twitter and I'm going to be on Twitter and I'm going to just really commit to spending some time building my community, developing my presence. One of the things that you can use to schedule in advance is a program called Buffer. There are also other examples called Hootsuite, and just there are a ton of these programs available. But the usefulness is kind of a set it and forget it, right? So if hypothetically I'm lucky enough to be about to publish something, I can I can schedule in advance milestones like 1 week to publication, or 2 months since my publication date, or just got the date for my paperback release, or I'm doing this event. And then there are all kinds of opportunities to schedule in advance, just so that it's a way to kind of spend one larger chunk of time working on this instead of kind of working on it, for an hour every day. Like, it's just another way to manage that workload. And then, one of the things that is really near and dear to my heart as well is the email newsletter. I know that the email newsletter landscape is changing a little bit, but here I have a couple of examples, one from my own personal newsletter, one from, again, Roxane Gay, one of my favorites, and then a link to one of the best things that I read pre-pandemic, which I'm just going to share here in the chat. And a newsletter program is really useful for keeping a regular audience engaged. So, like, an example of when it might be appropriate to utilize a newsletter type program is like, okay, so hypothetically, I'm on this Zoom with all of you. You all RSVP'd using the Google form. So now I have all of your email addresses, and I want to tell you about when I am doing my next speaker series. So using like an email client would be a nice way to kind of keep in touch with you about that. Obviously, you would want everyone to opt in before receiving the messages. But that's kind of like, it can be a useful tool for staying in touch. I know that there are a lot of writers who are monetizing their newsletters, especially in the Substack section. And then also, like, a good old Gmail mailing list can be also free and easy and sufficient for whatever your needs are. But having the ability to follow up with people via email and keeping track of who is who and what that potential audience consisting of fans, friends, family, that's I think it's important.
And I think newsletters can be, as Amanda said, a really great way to keep up with your audience. I think the general rule of thumb, something I see a lot of new authors doing, is creating a newsletter, I think, too early, depending on what your audience is. I think a newsletter can be a really great resource once you've already built up some level of an audience, or as some people say, once you have news to share, then your first newsletter can be news to share, though different newsletters do different things. This doesn't have to be about things to share. For instance, Susan Dennard has a very popular newsletter. She's a fantasy author, and she had her newsletter and used it to build an audience for years and years and years, talking about her writing process and writing tips and tricks and stuff like that. So it depends on your audience. I will say a lot of writers are doing newsletters now, and a lot of people are starting to not subscribe to newsletters because their emails are getting cluttered with newsletters. So your newsletter audience is going to be, in some ways, your most dedicated audience. The ones that actually want to be a part of your newsletter and get that news and get whatever it is that you talk about in your newsletter are going to be your most dedicated people. I use Mailchimp personally, but I don't know, Amanda, Taryn, if you guys have a different preference. Amanda, you're muted still.
Sorry, my dog was protecting us from our produce delivery person. I also use Mailchimp. I'm using Mailchimp in kind of a non-traditional way, in that it's basically my blog, and that I send out a newsletter blog every week. What I like about Mailchimp, it's very user-friendly. For $10 a month, it lets me schedule posts whenever I want to. I think there's something like a 2,000 person limit, which I will absolutely never get to in the capacity that I'm using it for right now. So it's really, and they offer some nice templates, and I think Mailchimp can be appropriate for a lot of uses. I think Tiny Letter is kind of the lower tier Mailchimp, and depending on what you're hoping to accomplish, could be could be an option as well.
And I think on the flip side of not sending out a newsletter too early, is also don't send it out too late. Don't send it out only because you have something to promote. Because I think, we all want to feel that the authors that are reaching out to us are doing it because they want to have a reciprocal relationship. And I see a lot of people sending out a newsletter 2 weeks before their book comes out. And these seem like very different newsletters, and the type that Amanda's talking about, where she has kind of her own content in theme, and it's already developed. This is primarily to promote a book, but some of those coming out lasting for 6 months, say, and then going and disappearing. And that doesn't, to me, feel like a genuine way really to market a book and create a community, because it's so lopsided and not saying here, let's have a reciprocal kind of conversation about some of these things. So I think that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind, that timing does matter with how you promote your work, particularly if you're signing up to do something that is going to happen regularly over a sustained period. I just want to throw out 2 more tips. I forgot to mention earlier, bookstores and public libraries are really great resources. I mean, here in the Portland area, we're so lucky to have Print Bookstore, Longfellow, Kelly's Books to Go. They're all really great, and they all are super into promoting books, primarily in their newsletters, but also through events. Also, your public libraries, they want to know when you have a book out. They are always looking to bring in folks. And I don't think I particularly realized that until I started working at a literary arts organization, where they're calling us to be who has books coming out? We want them to come speak with people. So those are the 2 things to keep in mind. And then just know that if some of this seems intimidating to digest, because it's a lot, there's so many great possibilities, and you don't have to do all of these things, but that also like there are people there to help you. You know, that's why we're doing this. You guys are going to tell us what's worked for you too, but like I bet you can shoot any of us emails about, you know, tips that we haven't covered during this time, that if you have specific questions. And also you know, one of the main things I think I've learned working for Maine writers is that it's not a big ask to ask literary organizations to help spread your name and promote your work. Like that is what we're here for, because we love to celebrate great writing and we love to support writers. So don't be shy about reaching out to others for help promoting your work. It's not something you're meant to necessarily do alone. And there really are a lot of resources at your fingertips. Once you get started, it's a lot easier than just that initial like, holy shit, I have to join Twitter now and I have to, you know, suddenly have like 500 to 5,000 followers. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be as scary as it can seem. And I think that's been a big lesson learned for me that I just wanted to share with you all before we kind of open it up a little bit more.
Absolutely. And to your point, Taryn, I see a lot also with Twitter, with writers who hear Twitter is the best tool to promote yourself, because it definitely used to be considered that. And I think it's moving more into Instagram, but Twitter is still a very, very big space for that. But there's a lot of authors on Twitter who will join Twitter just before their book release. And then all of their tweets are, buy my book,
Yeah.
my book's on sale, here's my book, and that's not a way to get people interested in you. That's not a way to get an audience or create that community. So any of the platforms, any of the things we talk about, whether it's a newsletter, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, you know, in-person communities, you shouldn't necessarily just show up to an in-person, you know, literary community when you have a book to promote. If you find ones in your area that you think are cool, show up to them beforehand. Show up to events. Speaking of your local bookstores, I was given the advice to go to as many events at my local bookstore as I could, so that by the time I do have a book to promote, all the event organizers are going to recognize me and be like, hey, that's so cool. Like, you're always supporting other authors' events. Now we're super excited to put on an event for you. Right. So that's the reciprocal nature of making sure that you're there. And that leads us into our sort of biggest number one tip, I think, for building your community and promoting yourself, is actually to promote others, is to be there and support other writers in the community, is one of the biggest ways to kind of create that reciprocal relationship and create that audience and that branding for yourself. Because by promoting things that you like, inevitably those are things probably that you want to write about too. And so people will start following you because they see you talking about other cool things that they love or that they find are cool. And also those writers will want to promote you back, right? And that kind of thing. I don't know if Taryn and Amanda, if you had anything else to add on the promoting section.
No, I guess I just think like, you know, I just got, you know, my friend Robin Clifford Wood, who is a CNF writer from Stonecoast, who graduated with me. I just received her book. I'm so excited about it. I'm definitely going to share about it on Instagram because I'm just so excited for everyone to see it. And, you know, just like, it comes from a really genuine place for me that like, these are things that I get excited about. And I think that other people can tell when you are feeling excited.
Absolutely. You need your promotion to be genuine. If you're coming at it with that, I must promote others just to get promoted myself, people are gonna realize that you're not coming at it from an actual place of genuine excitement and a genuine member of the community, right?
And I think on that note, we have a book trailer to share, right?
We do. Yeah. And just one thing that came up for me while you all were talking was, I think something that I've realized through doing my own newsletter is that as writers, our path is a little bit different than a lot of people's. And I think that the journey is exciting for people to follow along. Like, I have found that people in my life, people who even know me sort of peripherally, are like, whoa, you're on a really cool journey. You're like doing this hard work. You're doing this cool, creative, weird thing. And so I think that itself is a lot, you know, like that's a great a great reason to start a newsletter. So I love everything you all have said.
A newsletter a blog, a YouTube channel, an Instagram, Twitter, anything that you can share your writing process, I think is, people love that. And it's super exciting.
Yes. I'm just going to share our document one more time in the chat. If anybody has anything to please do. And I would also like to, before I'm going to show a book trailer, which is something that I've learned about this year because I've seen some really great ones. I've been like, wow, this is a thing. Okay, cool. By Josh Gothier. He's a Stonecoast grad. He just came out with a book. So I'm going to share this with everyone. Would also love if anybody here has, especially our presenters, but anyone, if you have a newsletter or an account or anything that you want to share with, do so. This can be one of those spaces where we follow each other, we promote each other's work, we support each other. So here is Josh Gothier's awesome book trailer. Oh, hold on. 1 second. Sorry, I didn't share the sound right. All right. Well, in the meantime, let me figure this out, and please share your accounts. I'll be right with you.
There's a lot of really fun book trailers. I've seen some people do some really, really cool ones. I had a Twitter friend, I should say someone I met through the Twitter writing community, who came out with a superhero book and created a book trailer that was kind of like a mock of the Avengers trailer, but for her book. So there's a lot of fun ways that you can do these quick 2-minute book trailer videos if you have any kind of cinematography skills or acting skills or friends who have those skills. I have another example for The Sky in the Deep, which is a YA fantasy based on kind of like Viking stuff. The author had a friend who had like a whole Viking get up from like Halloween or something, and they went out to the mountains and they just filmed her running around the mountains in her Viking get up, and they put it to dramatic music and then text, and they made a book trailer for her book, just as simple as that. So yeah.
Have you guys out there who are on this Zoom, do you guys have other things that you've been doing, or have you been doing some of these things? And what has that experience been like for you? Like, do other people have news channels? Or I'm curious to hear what you all have found helpful, or maybe what you tried and didn't find helpful.
So I'll unmute myself. And I'll say I've been a blogger for a long time. So I think I started my blog about 10 years ago, and I've been sporadic, but I've made a point of doing it every week. And and connected with a lot of as well as people in the community. And it's another way to connect, I guess, similar to the newsletter. And I guess what I've just noticed with WordPress, so I was going to try it, is that they have an option that you could do. So I'm going to try that as an experiment and see how that works.
My God, we didn't even talk about podcasts. I can't believe it.
Podcasts are a huge platform too. And that's I think that relates back to the sort of overall advice, as we've all said, is, it's so overwhelming, and there's so many different spaces and communities and things that you can do. And in the end of the day, just choose the ones, right? The one or the ones that you like the best, and put your time and effort into them.
I can share.
Yeah.
Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance was so important to me, and it really, aside from taking the Saturday workshops, when I got into the 10-week workshop, that's where I really found community. And I found my poets group. We kind of became a poets group after one of our 10-week workshops, and then I group through Maine Writers and Publishers Alliance, which just sharing of resources and connecting outside of those groups was, I think, and from there, I'm starting Stonecoast in June. And it was like attending even one of those Saturday workshops where I always felt like Stonecoast was out of reach. I've got 2 kids going into college, but I met another writer from Stonecoast who was like, oh, I've got kids in nursing school and I can't believe I'm doing this right now. And it was just that kind of, it stayed in my ear. So it's just, I found courage and community in my little tribes, and it all kind of started with MWPA. And from there, I found like other literary, especially because of COVID, I found other literary organizations in other states. They're also doing a lot of online workshops, and then can always on the social media platforms just to continue that relationship. But I think I really strongly recommend like digging in and committing to one of those 10-week workshops, because that's where you build relationships. So that was a real game changer for me.
And for those of you who aren't in Maine, there's like Grub Street in Boston is a great resource for people. Loft Literary in Minnesota, Catapult, which does a lot of online classes. I mean, there's definitely more regional specific ones that you can find too. But for me, I agree, Melissa. My writers group came out of like 10-week long classes. There's something about reading people's writing over a sustained period and all being vulnerable together that really lends itself well to community and finding your tribe either before your MFA program, after your MFA program.
Another place for community are literary magazines.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that I was recently published in Defunct, and they had a launch party online, and we their celebration. And I've noticed a lot of literary magazines, they have newsletters that promote news and say publish you, they're excited for you if you're published somewhere else. So it's another way of networking and checking in with other writers.
Yeah, and all of these places are all on Instagram and Twitter. So
yes, and
it's like a really nice organic place to start of spending more time on either of those platforms.
I found that it was very useful to do a newsletter that I actually did in-person events. This is how long I've been doing this. I would give away a book, and people would have to sign up for my newsletter to take a chance on the book. I had a built-in audience that carried me. I wasn't doing events. I wasn't doing events. And somebody said this, those are your rabid fans. Those are the people who want to talk to you. Those are the people who want to know what you're doing. Doing it and what you're doing. And I get shopping for shoes. What so that's been the second thing I want to say is now, well, okay, I get the woman who said that her children were graduate from Stonecoast the same time my granddaughter graduates from college. We're going to graduate in the same year. So I've waited a long time to do this. and I welcome to Stonecoast. I think it's been a great experience.
There was, in fact, a person in Naja and I's starting Stonecoast class who started at Stonecoast at the same time as her grandson was at Stonecoast. Yeah, yeah. So it's
just
pretty
amazing.
cool.
I mean, get your grandson to do your social media, right? Like,
Right, why not?
there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of writers, especially in this community, from all different walks of life, and there's, definitely reach out if you want help with that, if you need help. I'm sure there are people in this community that would be excited to
Well,
share.
one of the things about community too is that I've recently become the I write crime and mystery. I've recently become the library liaison for Sisters in Crime, which is a New England wide. So I've hooked up with New England. People are calling me wanting to know what I'm writing. It's like a whole new experience in my life. It's great. I can't say enough about going to the and being part of a community, and actually donating your time, because it's just been a wonderful experience.
Absolutely.
I did find the book. So the book I on a trip, guys. It was the thing where it was playing on, hear the music, and I was like, oh no. So I would love, we can end with that, but if anybody has any to share, if there's any other questions out there that haven't been answered yet, any resources we could share as a community that would be helpful, we can do that trailer.
I have a question for Amanda. I am dying. Is it something that you just teach yourself? Any support around how to learn it for the non-graphically designed inclined?
Great question. When you first start your account, there's little tutorials what are you trying to make? And it will give you the option of choosing something formatted specifically for the dimensions of Instagram, specifically formatted for the dimensions of a Facebook banner, even I've made brochures in Canva, 8.5 by 11 PDFs, that PowerPoint that we just saw was a Canva creation. Yeah. So starting by deciding what it is, what the size is that you're looking for, then they'll offer you different types of templates announcement, save the date, all of these different options that you can share. And then I think when you're a new user, it'll do suggestions, a little arrow, change the color if you'd like. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are the whole point is for it to be user friendly, and I think that it kind of is. And then just having sort of, I like to think having a style in mind is kind of helpful. I have my favorite typefaces that I like. I have specific colors that I gravitate towards. And so if you're sharing on behalf of yourself or an organization, having a little bit of continuity in terms of what it looks like is really helpful. I know I'm thinking about, I'm not sure if she made these herself, but Melanie Brooks wrote a book about writing hard stories. It was a craft book about memoir writing, and she had all these beautiful little quotes formatted the same with a little pen, and an attribute, and that sort of thing is so easy to make in Canva. So yeah, start an account. They may try to needle you to upgrade because they are a for-profit company.
But the free account goes a long way. It took me 4 years before I decided that I used it enough to upgrade to Pro. And I also use it for work too. So that's one of the reasons I upgraded to Pro. But as just a writer promoting yourself, the free account has so much. And that's also what Amanda said about kind of having a color scheme, is if you are interested in making aesthetics and mood boards, like what I linked to on my website earlier, the number one tip to make those look good is to choose pictures that have the same general color vibe. Because I see a lot of mood boards that are just like a bunch of random images that they don't seem to go together because they just don't have the same color. You know, they're like a warm tone and a cool tone and then a neon, right? And you're like, oh, this looks chaotic. So find images that are like that same sort of, like they're all kind of oranges and reds as primary colors, and then that'll look really nice when you put them all together in a mood board. And Canva has different grids, so you can choose the grid that you want to snap to the, you know, to the overlay, right? And then you automatically put the pictures in the grids, and then it looks great. So Canva's great. We could talk for an hour about Canva.
Yeah. Which is awesome, you know, and that's why we're all here, so we can touch the iceberg and keep going. But we are coming up in 8:15, which is the time that we usually promise that everyone. I just wanted to let everyone know that this is a bi-monthly series, and so not next month, but the month after in June, we'll be back with another session. So please stay tuned. We're so grateful to Taryn and Jasmine and Amanda for joining us tonight. And do the three of you have any last things you'd like to say before we end with that trailer and say goodnight?
I think the word that I heard multiple times is genuine. So just keep it genuine and you really can't go wrong.
And thank y'all for coming and listening to us blabble. Blabble, that's a new word. We're writers.
I love it. Well, thank you all so much.